From The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. I believe that the lives unfurling behind those doors were much the same as my own. Every boy and girl had good parents like my parents. Every child went to bed with a full belly, in a warm bed, knowing they were loved. That was the life every child was supposed to have, wasn't it?
Welcome back to the Reading Room Ruffians, your favorite library podcast. Today we're discussing Wicked Boy by Kate Summerscale. This is Mallory, today's murder detective, and I'm joined by my true crime vixen BFF, Ariel. Our Supreme Overlord Carla is here, and she's ready to talk murder.
It's murder!
We are recording from our library in Jackson County, West Virginia. Zach is off in the land of Mickey, so boo on him unless he brings us back presents. Before we get to it, you can find our Facebook group by searching Reading Room Ruffians Podcast, which is linked to our library's Facebook page at facebook.com/Jackson County Library WV. You should give us a follow on TikTok and Instagram at WVJCO Library, and give our podcast Goodreads page a look, which we have linked in our episode description, along with our personal Goodreads pages. Yay. So this book, I gave it 4 stars only because we were given a lot of information, like it's relevant to the story, but I felt like it was extraneous. There was a lot of what else was going on at the time, like elections, and there was like a huge like conservative swing from liberal. I don't really know like actually what that climate means, but we talked about the cricket match that the boys went to after their mom was killed and how that was such a big deal. And like, fine, whatever, but they just went to a cricket match like after murdering their mom. Like, it's
no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Like, so anyway, there was information that I felt took away a little bit more than it was supposed to help, but the story itself is wild. And I really, really recommend reading this or listening to it. Either way, I think you'd be very intrigued by just how in-depth actually they ended up going into this case and how relevant it kind of still is. It's if you really think about it. So let's set the scene for you here. Yeah. Let's set the scene for you. So Robert is 13 and his brother Natty is 11. And I think Natty is short for Nathaniel. And so their father, he sails on ships with cows from America to England. He obviously went to pick up cows.
Carla's losing it.
Sailing moose, y'all.
It's just the way you said that.
I know.
I mean, it's like he transports cattle.
Yeah.
He sails with cows.
He does sail with cows. But anyway, he's actually got like a pretty cushy job for what he does. He makes more than most of the men on the ships, but he's also not like super important. So I don't know how he got to making that money, but good for him.
Probably because cows don't do well on ships.
I mean, probably not, but he still makes, I think it was something like his total for the year was like 76 pounds or something like that.
That's a lot for them.
Yes, is a lot. And so they were fairly comfortable. And so, he was gone for 3 weeks at a time. And it was like, a week there. They would spend a week unloading and then loading more cattle and then a week back. And that's a mom with 2 boys for 3 weeks at a time. And apparently Robert is very smart. And you don't really find out until later, but he's apparently too smart. Like his brain is too big for his head. And so he has some behavioral issues. And he is like, they essentially say he's too smart.
I've got a question. Is his brain literally like his skull's too small and it's causing pressure? Or is it he's just that smart?
Yeah, his IQ is just too high.
They kind of phrased it as his brain is too big for his skull. Like he has too much brain for his age is kind of how it was phrased. I don't know that that's really a thing, but like
it could be.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't really know anything about it. And she didn't go much further into it, which kind of irks me because I don't want to Google that, but also I'm probably going to after this podcast. But yeah, so he's very smart, and apparently he also like fixates on things, which I'm almost wondering is just like, is he just autistic? Like we don't know.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, like, and you don't really get a sense of him actually being off during this. Like, obviously murdering your mom and then pretending it didn't happen is very off, but he doesn't seem like he's actually very behaviorally like bad. And his mom actually just like loves him. So, she's very proud of him, but very proud of how smart he is, all this other stuff. And she's kind of just, Natty is naughty. Like, she just is always onto him.
Naughty Natty.
Yes, right? Yeah. And so he's pretty defiant of her. If she will ask him to do something, he will just like, no, I'm not doing it. He is prone to stealing food from her. I don't know if that means like while she's eating, he goes up and like takes her food. I don't really know. But apparently couple of nights before Robert murders her, he steals food, and then their mother like beats him like severely and essentially threatens Robert as well. And so Natty is kind of like, he doesn't outright say, I'm going to kill mom. Robert is kind of just like, would you like to kill mom? And Natty's like, I guess. And
sounds
then
like
he's
a
like,
fun game.
yeah, right. And then he's like, well, no, I don't think I could. And Robert's like, well, what if I do it for you? And Natty's like, okay.
Like, what do you even do in that situation?
Especially it's like your older brother. Like they're pretty close. And I don't know. So it's just, oh gosh. All right. So this is where it kind of gets weird. Like you don't really find this out until pretty far in. But whenever their dad goes to sea, Robert sleeps with their mom. And that doesn't really sound weird until you think that that's a 13-year-old boy. And also she wrote a letter to her husband, Robert, just the day he left, and essentially was saying, I can't believe you would think I would have visitors while you're gone. As in, like, it's just kind of alluded to how defensive she is, that he means a man. And so you're just kind of like, oh, this child is sleeping in bed with their mom. She was found not in like a nightgown chemise. She was in her underwear. Okay. And I'm just like, y'all better not be talking about this child. So, okay. Robert tells the police, he tells his aunt who like finds their mother finally, essentially that he was laying in bed with her and was supposed to wait for Natty. Like Natty was supposed to have coughed 2 times, and that was whenever he killed her. And then a little bit further on, it was, she kicked me in bed and then I stabbed her. And so we don't actually know. Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. Like the whole thing is a little bit suspicious. You don't actually know because Robert's really the only one that knows. Everybody else is just kind of like, this is what I figure, or this is what,
No.
Yeah.
Did he kill both of his parents?
No. His father was gone. His father was at sea. So Robert had waited until his father had left to kill their mom because that would give them like 3 weeks without their mom.
Which, I mean,
or their dad. So he kills their mom. And that next morning, he takes her purses and her dresses and gets all of the money out of like pockets and such. And they go on a trip they have like, they called it like the Lord's cricket match or something like that. I don't know, whatever. It's like this big match of rich men playing against actual cricket players. And apparently it's like a massive thing. So it's like a weekend-long thing. And they only went to the first day of it. The second day, I don't remember what they were doing. But the day after that, they went and found someone that they knew that was not really a direct colleague of their dad, but had worked with their dad. His name was John Fox. And they kind of told John Fox, they were like, our mom has gone to Liverpool to see her family. We had a rich aunt die. And, she's there going through all the stuff. We're gonna get money. And she says that she'll pay you, I think it was like a shilling for every day you're there. Like you're with us until she gets back. And he's like, well, okay. Like, and this is just, he doesn't sound like he's as old as he is this whole time. Cause they just go out and they play and, he takes care of them. Like he does not do anything weird with them. Like he's a good dude, but essentially he's 45 and they kind of make it that John Fox is very simple. And you don't know if they mean that as in like he could harm the kids, or he's just like not very smart. I get the feeling that he's just not as like worldly, and he's seen a lot. So it's just kind of like, yeah, I'm just going with it. So he takes care of these kids for, I think it's like a week and a half. Yeah. She's there in the middle of summer for a week and a half in her bed, rotting. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is like one of their hottest summers. They have had a drought.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
There hasn't been rain in like record years. And so it's gross. Okay. And so it gets to the point, the drought gets so bad that they turn off the water and they turn off, I don't know, something else. And so, yeah, the smells get gross. And it's not just the house, though. Like all of England, essentially at this point, is starting to stink of sewage. And finally it gets so bad. Like, I don't know, yeah, a week and a half in. And let me see here, the mailman and then a neighbor and I think one other person called other neighbors to have them come check on the house because something like stunk there and it didn't seem like the normal stink.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they cut to the boy's Aunt Emily, which is weird because their mom's name is also Emily. There's just a lot of the same names in this book. Like it's just whatever. So Aunt Emily comes to try and check on the boys because she hasn't heard from her sister-in-law in a couple of days, which is just unlike her. But then it is like her. It's just it's not like her. So she goes to check on the boys and the house and nobody answers. She comes back, I don't know, 3 days later, and John Fox answers the door, and he's wearing her brother's suit, which she had like bought and then put up. So like she knows it's her brother's suit. And she's just like, where's my sister? And he's like, well, she's in Liverpool. The boys told me that she's visiting an aunt or, whatever. And she's like, well, that's weird of her to not have told me. And he's just like, close the door. Like,
I'm not dealing with this.
Okay, bye. And so that just like sends alarm bells off for her because that's a man in this house. Her brother is not there. Like Emily's not answering the door, and she doesn't really see anything from the boys. She's just like, whatever. Nobody really believes her, and so a couple of days later, she takes a friend with her, and they go and knock. Nobody answers. They come back, I don't know, an hour or two later. Nobody answers. They go to their mother's house. Well, okay. Aunt Emily goes to her mother's house and essentially asks her mother to send a telegram to Emily's mother in Liverpool to see if she's there, to see if she's actually there. They find out that she's not there. So Emily's like, no, something's wrong here. So she barges over to the house. She pounds on the door. And finally, Robert opens the door and he's like, oh, hi, Aunt Emily. She's like, where's your mom? And he's like, oh, well, she's in Liverpool. She's like, no, she's not. Like, where is she? And he's like, well, I don't know what to tell you other than like a rich aunt died. And so we're going to be rich. And she's like, no, like just barges in with her friend. And they go to the parlor and, like John and Natty and Robert had been playing cards in the back parlor. And she's just like, what's going on? And Robert's like, Aunt Emily, I don't know what you mean. Like, mom has told us, like all this stuff. She goes, I don't believe you. Like, please tell me what's going on. Where is your mother? And Emily's friend, Aunt Emily and their mom, Emily's friend, goes, your mom's dead upstairs, isn't she? And Robert goes, no. And about that time, Emily goes, I'm going to go check your mom's room. Natty kind of like just stands up and just like yeets out the door, right? He's like, nope, I'm gone, bye. And he was like, well, Robert's like, well, the room's locked and we don't know where the key is. Like, so, and she's like, we're going to bust it down. She sends her friend, she's like, go get a constable. I'm busting this door down. Like, whatever. So she goes and she tries to budge the door. It won't budge. So they go and get the landlady. They unlock it and they find her just essentially a form in bed covered with a sheet and a pillow over her face. Okay. And it hits them like the stench. It's awful, overwhelming, and just she is beside herself. She goes back downstairs and she looks at Robert and she goes, what have you done? And he goes, all right, well, I guess I'll tell you the truth. Like, legitimately, that's pretty much what he says. And he says, so Mom gave Natty a horrible whipping for stealing food, like whatever day it was. And so I decided to kill her because she also threatened me, like, whatever. All this, the whole story goes through. He's like, oh, and now like we're up to today. Like that's all. And she's just like, you've just been chilling with your mom, dad upstairs. Like nothing. He's just like, yeah, okay.
Okay, see, right now, this is so weird because he's not acting right.
Yeah.
And why would Aunt Emily say your mom's dead upstairs, isn't she?
It was actually her friend. Like her. Yeah. Her
why
friend
would they
said
say
that.
that?
I don't
this
think
seems like a weird.
it does seem like a weird thing, but I think at that point they were definitely suspicious that something had happened.
Oh, because
and
of the smell.
boys,
Yeah, okay.
and the boys wouldn't tell them. Like, I mean, it was just and they knew that their mom was not actually in Liverpool, like they were saying.
Yeah.
So they didn't know.
I mean, but I don't know.
Yeah, me either.
That probably would have been my first.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
did she
so
leave you?
Yeah.
I
don't know.
Is she sick? It's
Yeah.
like-
I have no idea. It was such a weird jump for me because I don't know. I really don't know because she said that and I was just like, how does she know? Like,
yeah.
It's weird. So then, yeah, so she gets the constable, Aunt Emily does, and she's like, Robert has confessed to me. And so the constable's like, hey, yeah, so what did you tell your aunt? And he says the exact same thing, like repeats the story. They take him down to the station. He repeats it again, I think like 2 more times, and it doesn't change. Like, so they arrest him, they arrest Natty, and they arrest John Fox. And
Poor John.
I know, I feel so bad for him because he's essentially just like, the whole time he's just like, what? Which is kind of weird because like, how are you going to be in a house for a week and a half and not like notice something different? But if he didn't really leave the house with the boys, and I don't think that they actually did, like I think the boys went to play, but I think he just stayed there. I think the couple of times he left was like to pawn stuff off for the boys, which was a fairly typical thing to do. You would have nice things, and then if you needed the money, you could just pawn it, and then whenever you get the money back, you can go get your stuff back. That was a fairly typical thing to do, especially for like middle class people like them. And so yeah,
maybe you just got accustomed to it and you didn't know. I don't know.
And he ended up like very far into the book. Like somebody was asking him, "How did you not?" And he's just kind of like, "My smell is bad." Which
I see.
Yeah.
That would be me.
Yeah,
I could think
and once you find out like what actually happened to him, he used to work on ships that did the whole cattle thing. And one time the ship caught on fire, and he was on the ship, and it was just like, I think like 6 of them made it out. And it was like they were very lucky because another ship happened to be close by and saw their stress signal, whatever. So it's just like, he's definitely been through a lot. And so maybe he's not. And so I don't think, and Natty never gave him, I think, but like 1 shilling for going to pawn stuff off. And he pawned like 5 or 6 things off for them. So like 1 shilling for all of that, there's no way. Like, I don't think that if he were privy to any of that, he would have taken just 1 shilling. He would have been like, give me more. Like, and he didn't expect to get anything from them because he thought he was getting paid once Emily got back. And so, I just, and a couple of points, he's like telling them, if you don't settle down, I'm going to tell your mom whenever she gets back. And, like, she's going to get onto you. And they just like go about like nothing ever, like, oh yeah, that's definitely.
See, this whole thing is so weird.
So weird. So, they investigate the house and the police find a bunch of penny dreadfuls, and they are Robert's. And Robert is like obsessed with penny dreadfuls, which I don't know if you guys know what they are. They are like short, like stories for boys, essentially. Cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. And they're dreadful. Like, they're not cutesy little adventure stories. They're like, we're going to scalp some Indians and we're going to like, steal some stuff and we're going to murder some people. Like, whatever. It happened just after Robert. It was like a phenomenon. Almost every little boy that they caught as a criminal had a penny dreadful in his pocket. And then they were just kind of like, everybody tried to make that a thing. Like, well, if your boys read penny dreadfuls, they're going to be criminals, which,
watch out.
I mean, yeah, which like in the case, like pretty much all of those boys absolutely had penny dreadfuls, but also all of the other boys had them too, and they weren't criminals. So it's just kind of like, we wanted it to be a thing, but it's not. And so the newspapers catch wind during the trial. In the trial, so they set things up. They have like a medical examiner's trial and then like another, like a criminal trial, I guess. So it goes through.
Could they even tell from the medical examiner that she was stabbed? Or was it, I mean, her body was in such bad shape? How would they know?
So I guess, yes, like at first
was
glance.
It like, if they hit bone or
yeah,
something?
well, okay. So essentially, God,
the knife was still
gross.
there.
Actually, yeah. And
It
Robert,
was,
yeah, Robert told them the knife's on the bed. Like, I left it there. Like, obviously I did it. Like,
Yeah.
Once he's caught, he just cops up to it. He's like, yeah, I did it. Fine, whatever. Tells them where everything is going to be, gives them all the receipts for all the pawn things, everything. Just tells them everything. And so Emily is obviously under the sheet. She is also has a pillow over her face. Maggots have eaten her eyes and her wounds. She was stabbed twice, they found, in her heart. And yeah, and they had also eaten other soft bits. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Like, it was nasty. And there was were so many.
I wanted to read this up until this point.
Is this too gross for you?
I don't do maggots.
That's fair. It wasn't a
Maybe
pretty...
we'll just skip over that.
Yeah. It's fairly close to the beginning. You'll know, like, once they open the door, just like skip ahead.
Yep.
Like, yeah. Because it was grotesque listening to it. And I don't even want to repeat some of the things they said because it was, yeah, no way, dude. So yeah, they figured out once they actually had examined her body, they did discover that she was stabbed twice. And it kind of comes to light. So they go to trial. I know I'm like skipping around a little bit, but I'm trying to hit all of the high points where you find out a bunch of information. So you find out once they're in trial, their initial trial, I don't know, he's not really a judge, but he kind of is. I guess you call him a barrister or something like that. He decides that Natty kind of seems like he didn't really do anything. So he takes Natty, like the charges off Natty, and basically puts him on the stand to testify against Robert. And so like they're asking Natty, like, what happened? And Natty says essentially the same thing. He's like, Mom had beaten me for stealing food. And Robert said that he was going to kill her. And I didn't really think he would. And all this other stuff. And they're just kind of like, so when did he buy the knife? And it was while their dad was still home. So this was way before Natty would have been beaten. And so they're just kind of like, huh? And then it comes out that actually the knife that Robert showed Natty was a different knife altogether from the knife that he actually used. And he had bought that knife also around the same time that he bought the first knife. And the first knife, the knife that he showed Natty, was essentially like a sharpened butter knife. And the one that he used to kill their mom was, oh God, it was essentially a dagger. Like, it was not just a little knife that a boy would just buy. Like, it was, it was something. And then Natty says essentially that he was going to do it as soon as their dad left. And he bought it, and then their mom beat Natty. And so he moved the knife. I think he had it like downstairs somewhere. And then he hid it in the fireplace that was in Natty's room. And I don't know why he really called it Natty's room, because there are literally just two bedrooms, like the parents' bedroom and then the back bedroom. And so I don't really get the...
It's because he slept with his mom all the time.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, it was really just weird. And so they're all just like, so this is not just like, I'm just going to buy this and then kill mom with it like in 2 days. It's just like weeks. And so
it was premeditated, basically.
Yeah.
So why?
Yeah. And so they've then asked Natty more questions, and they're like, so what happened whenever your brother came in to tell you that he had that he had done it? None of them basically said murder, because Natty had lost it a couple of times. He was dancing around pretty much everything that had to do with her actually dying. And so Natty says, well, he came in and he said that he had done it. I said, no, you haven't. And so he told me to come in there and look with him if I didn't believe him. So I did. And I heard a moan. And so I left. And so then everybody's like, oh, no, she wasn't actually dead. Like, So then they were like, okay, so then what happened? And Natty goes, well, Robert said he was going to go back to bed. And yeah.
He slept beside his dying mother?
Yeah.
Wow.
So then they kind of are all just like, essentially you hear the room just like filled with horror. Like not like massive gasps or anything, but it's just like, obviously everybody in the room was like, this kid is just saying he's going back to bed with their mom. Okay, even though like she's obviously, he thinks that she's dead, but now we know that she's not because she moaned, okay? But then like he goes back in there and like sleeps with her, yes, but then he does something to actually kill her because she is dead. So like we don't know if she's stabbed again or if he's suffocated her because they find her with a pillow over her face. So they don't actually know what killed her, like a second stab or like if the second stab was just like 1-2 and then, you know, he smothered her. We don't know. And yeah, so he does. He sleeps in the bed with her the rest of the night.
Psychopath.
I know. Yeah, right? And then afterwards, they don't sleep upstairs at all. I think like maybe one time they do. And then a couple of days into having John Fox there, they have John sleep upstairs in the second bedroom. And so this is when I'm like, how? But they did say whenever the door opened, it was just like, it really. And so I think a couple of times Robert goes in to, I think, look for stuff to pawn and also, I guess, check that she's dead. Natty never goes in again after he sees their mom is stabbed the first time. And so this is such a wild, I can't. Okay, so.
It really doesn't even seem real.
No.
Because it's like, what?
Yeah. And a lot of time it's really wild because they do equate actually some of the things that he's done and how he acts like from this time and after to some of the stories of Penny Dreadfuls that he has. But I really think, obviously he planned it. Obviously he did it. I think that he has dissociated so hard at this point that it doesn't feel like he's actually done it. And he doesn't actually get it until he's found guilty the first time. Let me see, him and John Fox are sent to jail.
Poor John.
I'm telling you. And this whole time, like none of them have representation. So obviously the boys, their dad's not home. They don't have money.
Like they tried them without a parent?
Yeah. And they weren't like, I'm trying to explain, it's different. Like they were obviously, once they were first found guilty, it wasn't so much they were really guilty. It was essentially just, can this be tried criminally? And so, yes. And so that's essentially what it was. And by the second trial, one of John Fox's former employers is like, there's no way he did this knowingly. So he goes and talks with John a little bit while he's in jail and asks him some stuff and, you know, and sends this all to the papers because he doesn't think that John's done this. And so then while they're in there, they monitor with doctors, the men and women in the jails. And Robert, a couple of times, just becomes extremely agitated. They say he's just basically like, he like whistles and sings at the top of his lungs and he just like kicks the doors and like, not like bad, but they put him in a padded room. And so they bring in the doctor and the doctor like talks to him a couple of times about this stuff. And he's just kind of like, I don't think that Robert's actually right.
There's something wrong there.
I kind of feel, and so, you know, like he asks about what happened again. And he just is so disconnected talking about it. And he doesn't really seem like it means anything. And so he's just like, there's no way that this kid like really doesn't, like, something has happened here. He is doing something that makes it not seem real to him. And so essentially the criminal trial comes around and it's then a point of, is he insane or is he not? And so it goes through the whole thing. They finally are like, well, if you find Robert insane, John Fox cannot be held accountable for any of this. Like, you know, both boys have said in trial, in their confessions, like the whole way through, that John really had nothing to do with anything but to take care of them and go like find ways for them to have money. And that was it. And so the fact that they kept him in jail for so long just makes me so angry because he really was just being a good guy for these kids. Like, their mom left them. Their dad's out
John.
at sea. Yeah. Like,
Justice for John.
Yeah, really. And so, yeah, they finally find that Robert is insane. And they send him off to a place called Broadmoor, which is an asylum, which has really bad connotations here, but straight up, it was a great place. And it was a great place for Robert. And I think he spent like 25 years there. So essentially, if you are found insane in a criminal trial, you stay there under the Queen's, whenever she says you can leave, you can leave. And essentially, like, nobody ever really appeals for that. So once you're there, nobody really leaves. I mean, people did, but it's just not a very super often occurrence. Somewhere around in there, Queen Victoria dies. And then I think there's like King Edward, I think was next. I really don't remember. That's awful of me. But around in there, somebody appeals. I don't remember who. Was it just Robert or was it their doctor, his doctor? I don't know. Anyway, somebody appeals and Robert is set free. And he decides to go to Australia and just kind of like see what he can make of himself out there. And I want to just make it known, Robert is never violent again in his life. Never.
He wasn't really before.
He wasn't before, no.
See, I think there's some kind of trauma response.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was, because that's just not normal.
No, it's really not. So he gets to Australia, and around in there, I'm not sure of the timing, but the First World War happens. And so he signs up to go, but he doesn't train as a soldier. He trains as a carrier, like, oh my gosh, whatever they're called. They carry the injured people off the field.
I don't know what
oh my gosh, I can't remember.
Idea.
Paramedic.
Well, I mean, essentially, yeah. Which at this time, they were not armed ever. They literally only carried supplies to help people and carry them off the field. And that is...
He would have been like almost 50.
Actually, no.
He was in there for 25 years and he was 13. So
he would have been like in his 30s. Yeah.
38.
Yeah.
To 40.
Which is old for somebody joining the army.
Okay.
But yeah.
This is my older math when the 80s were only 20 years ago.
So he joins the army and he goes to I think somewhere they were fighting the Turkey, somewhere in Turkey, which is horrible. Okay. Like he has seen some stuff. Like I would prefer to say the other word, but I don't want to bleep it out. He has seen some stuff, some very violent stuff, and he has somehow survived it. The worst he came out with it, which she went through a lot of the records of like letters and stuff from soldiers in his battalion and his troop and any of the other troops that were there at that time. And it was basically, if you were a carrier, you were one of the first to be picked off. Like they knew you weren't armed. They knew you weren't going to do anything to them. So they were just like, he makes it through this, right?
Your sound effects.
You're all so welcome right now.
It's like, that would have been much better with the visual. That one would have.
That was so great.
So he makes it through this, right? And they send him back home, and he's actually gone through so many things that they honorably discharge him. Like he has, I think, 3 different types of stars from the British Army. So, and then he finds himself like a little plot of land. He has like a little shack on it, and he essentially becomes a farmer. And so around in this time, he finds out that there is like a neighbor. I say neighbor, we're talking like farm neighbors, okay? There is a neighbor, and this neighbor has beat his stepson. Like within an inch of his life. So that's a little bit dramatic, but like the kid was sick, all right? He had the flu or something similar. And his stepdad got so mad that he wasn't working as well and beat him with a brush hook. And beat him with it, like had like slashes on his arm, his like black eye, like his nose is like, okay, this kid takes...
Robert's Batman.
This kid takes like 3 days to heal enough to go to the police station. He walks like miles to the police station. He's like, my stepdad did this to me. The police officer takes him to the house. The stepdad's eating. He's like, yo, this kid tells me you did this. And he's just like, yeah. And he's like, you did this, and like explained like all of his injuries. And he's like, well, no, I spanked him and then a cow kicked him. Police officer's like, okay, bro. And then presses charges against him, right? And so there's the trial, And essentially, the stepdad is found not guilty. But the kid is just like, whatever. Everybody knows he's a POS. So I guess the mom wants to move away with the husband because it's obviously embarrassing to have everybody know your husband is trash. So the kid doesn't want to go. So he just essentially, Robert's like, hey, will you come help me take care of my farm? And the mom's like, perfect, thank you, yeah. And so essentially, Robert raises this kid, just raises this kid that takes care of him. They take care of the farm and they find another little plot of land. They build another little shack, all this stuff. And, teaches him how to grow his own crops, all of this stuff, straight up is his dad. Okay.
Robin.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because Robert is Batman.
And so I think around age 17, this kid is just yeah, I'm old enough. I'm going to move out, whatever. And I think around that time, the Second World War rolls around and they have asked previous World War I veterans to join up if they're not over the age of 55. Well, he was, but he was I'm 53. Goes back, okay? Is the first line of defense for somewhere. I can't remember really. I think it was maybe I can't remember. Anyway, basically it was the first line of defense. Makes it through that, okay? Comes back and, his brother had also joined the army at some point. So both of them were just kind of not really, but also kind of checked in every once in a while. And so before he goes, Robert makes sure that if anything happens to him, everything goes to Harry, who is basically his son and not his brother anymore. And his brother had been married and, everything went to his wife, blah, 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 whatever. Super cute. Natty came to visit him once in a while. They lived 300 miles apart. But I mean, that's still, yeah, they both were in Australia, which is so funny to me.
That's kind of odd too. Yeah.
I think, and I'm trying to remember for certain, I'm not 100% certain, but I think whenever Robert got out, he had asked somebody about where Natty was and maybe somebody had told him, or he had just gone over there and then happened to find out that Natty was there. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but while he was in the war, he kind of asked to have updates on Natty or somebody give Natty updates on Robert. So either way, he still knew where Natty was once he was out of the army the first time around. So then Harry gets married, okay, and brings his family back to see Robert. And that's his family. And his grandkids, all this. Yeah, I'm going to cry about it, okay?
That's so cute.
I got so mad at the author for this, and I know that she regrets it too. But whenever she was first finding out, following Robert after he got out of the asylum, she couldn't find a whole lot. And that was obviously because he went to Australia. So once she found that he had gone there, she went looking for that, and she had a really hard time finding him. But once she did, she found his burial site. He was buried, and his headstone said, oh gosh, essentially it was, here lies Robert, blah, 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 and then loved and remembered forever and always by Harry, last name, and his family, forever, essentially. And she's like, who loved this man this much? Did they know? So she reaches out. She tries to find the actual family. She can't really find a lot. She finds a few leads finally. She just emails one day and she's like, hey, do you know this man? Or any of his relations? I would love to get in touch with them. And she's like, oh yeah, let me set you up. So then she emails the actual direct descendant and she's like, hey, I am doing this report on Robert and did you know that he murdered his mom whenever he was 13?
Why would you just ease into it?
And so you don't know actually all of Harry and Robert's story until after she sends this email, okay? So I was mad anyway. I was you see that on somebody's headstone and you think I'm going to tell them that they murdered their mom. I'm just going to, yeah. And so the woman emailed back and was like, I don't really feel like talking about this right now. I'd like to discuss this with my family before you meet with anybody else. And they finally do. And I think it's the three siblings. Okay. And they're I think maybe great-great-grandfather was Harry, maybe great-grandfather, unclear. But definitely they all love Harry, or not Harry. They all love Robert. Okay. And because Robert saved their grandfather, great-grandfather, their dad, all this. And they were just yeah, so it was kind of just really upsetting that you just told us that he murdered his mom whenever he was 13. And she was like, yeah, that was my bad. And I was like, yes, it was, Kate. Yes, it was.
Yeah, no, see, like, if somebody was like, if I, like, okay, somebody told me you murdered your mother, I'd be like, well, she was fantastic, so her mom must have done something awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there would be no question in my mind.
Yeah. And I just think for me, I think really it was just he was so good that they didn't like really want to believe it. I mean, that would be traumatic to find out the person you hold. It's traumatic, first of all, anyway. And second of all, you're going to find like the person that has really made sure that you exist is suddenly a murderer.
I would immediately blame the mom too. I'd have been like,
I guess, yeah. Like, you say,
and I would have been mad at that woman too.
Yep. Oh, for sure. I was so mad. I was like, I'm taking a star off for that. I took a star off. Like, not only because there was extraneous stuff in there, but because she said that, like just reaching out. Hey, yeah, that was my great-great-grandfather. Well, did you know? Surprise! Lady. So then they end up telling her like how great he was to their family, and she's just like, crap, man. And I was like, you better learn how to reach out to people. So yeah, that's essentially the end of the story. And I really think Robert did have maybe like a bout of insanity there. He kind of snapped. Oh, and I wanted to talk about this because it was really interesting. I don't know where she decided to look into this, but she looked into essentially other young boys murdering their mothers. And in every instance, pretty much, they had a mother who was like, not only like who was doting, but also like extremely violent at times, or like loud and just like mean. And it was always the brother who was like more adored by the mom that did the murdering, and they did it to protect their younger sibling. And and I was just kind of like, it makes sense.
I think the one kid getting in trouble for stealing food would probably be he didn't get enough to eat because maybe she was playing favorites and didn't want to feed him.
Yeah. And Natty was described as a very slim child. And he
was hungry.
Yeah. And he wasn't really like as out there as Robert was. Like Robert was very like a commanding presence. And Natty was just kind of like, I'm here. It's like you could tell there was definitely, and maybe that's just like a personality difference, but like Natty was always depicted in like by like family friends in the trial. Like they depicted him as a very small child. He looked younger to people than he was. And so, yeah, it was just...
Well, Robert had to be the adult.
Yeah.
When he was way too young to be an adult, probably in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing sounds a little fishy.
Yeah, I agree. I really think, and I hate to speak ill of the dead, but also she seemed pretty crazy. And I don't
had
mean
it coming.
Yeah, I really kind of feel like did she really deserve to die? Maybe not in that way, but also your kids didn't deserve to be treated like that. Like I guess it came out later on. I don't really, maybe whenever Robert was talking to the doctor at the asylum, that she would like threaten them with hatchets. She would throw knives at them. She would literally just like withhold food from them, and like just a whole bunch of others. And it wasn't always like all the time. Like she was also very loving, and
she's bipolar.
Yes, I'm really thinking so. Way. And I don't mean that like everybody bipolar is bad, but like I really feel like it was that, or it was something also horrible. Because like all of her friends essentially said she was way too lenient with the boys. Like she never really reprimanded them, and they were allowed to do whatever they wanted. But whenever you asked the boys, they did not say that. Like they said, yeah, she loved us, but also like she was angry at us like a lot. Yeah. And so it's just like a totally different, is one of those things like you don't see everything, especially if you think you do. Like, and another funny thing that I really like to see throughout the whole thing was how important people make themselves in situations like this. They were like, oh, well, I know this. And come to find out that was not the correct answer, like at all. It's just like, oh my gosh, how wild things got. Like from the murder itself, like rumors around it. And then also like how how the boys were. Like there was somebody that they called up to the stand that worked at the shop where he bought the knife. And it was a boy his age. And they had asked the boy, like, how do you know him? And he's like, oh, well, we went to school together at this school. And also he came to my mom's shop. And Robert was like, I never went to the school. And, and so they asked the boy again, and he was like, well, I mean, he came to my mom's shop. And he's like, okay, yeah, whatever.
And they took that testimony?
She got like all of like the trial stuff from transcripts. Like
Wow.
But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting testimony in there and a lot of stuff like it's a really good treasure trove of interviews with people and you learn a lot about Robert and Natty, but it's a really cool look at society. And I mean, like, we still do stuff like that. Like, the murder was sensationalized. Like, sensationalized. We still do that. I mean,
oh, yeah.
What? It's not surprising, but how things are blamed and not just looking at, like, the parents. Like, why would he do this? Like, how? Like, what made him? And they didn't look at any of this until he was already in the asylum. And the asylum was such a good place. Like, at one point, somebody who wasn't as well-to-do had written their family and been like, oh my gosh, you know, like I get to go outside in my garden every day. And, you know, we get to do like chess tournaments and we get to do like all, you know, all this great stuff. And so, you know, people complained about it and we're like, I can't believe we're paying for this. And finally, a rich person was like, y'all, I am rich. I am no longer rich because, you know, I'm in here. But he was like, this is not like super nice. Like, it's nice, but we're not just like living in money over here. Like we have to work. We have to like everything that we have, we work for. And he's like, it's a place to sleep and it's somewhere that we actually can like learn, we can grow, and we don't have to be something that we're not out there. Like,
and how bad would that family have to, what the position they were in for him to, the one guy to think that the
going out
was great.
Yeah, going out in your garden every day.
Yeah. It's just like all of them were given their own little plot to garden, whatever they wanted, fruits, vegetables. They would like barter stuff. You know, if Robert learned to be a tailor whenever he was in there, and he became a fantastic tailor. And that was actually his first job out of the asylum. And yeah, it was just like a whole big thing. It was what they learned there, they did really well. And they became like it was something that would, if they were to ever get out, you could use out there. Like you could become a farmer, you could become a tailor, and you know, like well respected in whatever you wanted to do if you ever got out. And so it's just like, y'all.
What happened to the dad and all this? Did they mention that?
Oh, you know what? Yes, actually. Okay, so he finds out basically as soon as he gets to America that he gets met with like a letter, or I guess maybe a telegram that says, your son killed your wife.
Surprise!
and
people
he's
are great at telling news.
Yeah. And, you know, he's on trial and, you know, this is what's happening. And it would have been more expensive for him to go back right then. So he had to wait until he had to go back on his trip back. Like, he couldn't just like up and go. And he was but while he was there, oh my God, he was like, it had by then become international news. It was a big thing in America. And so, you know, a lot of the places had come up to him and been like, oh my gosh, like, what do you think? And he's like, I just can tell you right now, Natty had nothing to do with it. I can tell you that Robert, I don't think has an actual violent bone in his body. I think John Fox had everything to do with this. And you know, like once he gets back and I think at that point is at like the criminal trial, he sees that actually like Robert definitely did it and that John really didn't, because John was able to have like a nice lawyer who asked like legitimate questions. And because whenever John Fox would ask questions for himself, that was like, if you didn't have representation, you were allowed to, whoever was testifying, you could be like, so did you find me in this place? Did I ever say anything like this? Or, you know, different things like that. But yeah, he actually got a lawyer, and that was very good for him. I was very happy about that. But yeah, it was, oh my God, it was just, there was so much. I took a lot of notes, guys. Like we know how I am with notes, and I took a lot of notes. There were a lot of conversations that happened. There were a lot of important like key moments, and we can't talk about them all. It is so much, but it is such a good story.
How did the author find Robert? Like what?
I don't actually. I think she does. I just don't actually remember what possessed her to start this. I think maybe she found like an old article or something, and she decided to go digging, and then it just sent her down a rabbit hole. I'm wanting to say because it was a big deal at the time, and I think there were like maybe one or two similar murders after that, and so it just like became a fairly popular reference point. Like,
I've never even heard.
Me either.
Of it. I was like, how did she just find this random boy?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't remember.
It was probably digging through papers.
Yeah.
To find something.
Yeah. And she did. Sorry, I'm like stuttering right now, but she really did. She went through, she said like labor papers, censuses, and like, I mean, anything and everything. Once she found him, she looked into every avenue. She tried to follow Natty as best she could, but really she wanted to focus more on Robert because obviously Robert did kill their mother. And for me, I don't know how I feel about Natty either. Like Natty definitely went along with it. I think, and Natty tried to say that so I don't think that the actual Natty coughs 2 times and I kill her thing happened. I think he wanted to say that so it wasn't so much only him, but I do think that Natty originally wanted to be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then was like, I don't think I actually can. So Robert was like, I'll do it for you. Like, and you know, and maybe we'll say that you're going to cough 2 times just so you feel like you have some power there. But I mean, you didn't, obviously. It's like,
it also could be that thing, like, you know, like how people like will get really aggravated and they're like, oh, I'm going to kill him. And then like, you kind of like nonchalantly discuss how you would do it. But you know, you'll never actually do it. And then with Robert not being all right, maybe he just took it very literally. Yeah. And they did say, okay, so this was another thing. Back to his like brain condition thing. They said that by the time he reached age 14, his skull should have been big enough for his brain. So like he wouldn't have had like headaches anymore. He wouldn't have had like his little outbursts, and he wouldn't have like focused on murder and like all this other stuff. And I was just like, I don't know that I agree with that, but I mean, maybe. I don't really know anything about your brain being too big for your skull. Like I mean, that would cause headaches and stuff like that. But and he did have headaches, but it's like I just feel like a lot of that was just like a cop out. Yeah. And I think definitely something was wrong, but also I really feel like if you have enough trauma, like I feel like probably watching your brother get beat severely for wanting food is probably like the most traumatic. And then apparently their parents fought right before their dad left about her cheating. And so like that's got to maybe set something off too. And so it's like I don't know. There's a lot of I don't knows about this, and it's cool because you can think about all the different ways. And like it obviously happened, but it's also kind of like a mystery, like that didn't really get solved. So it's interesting in that sense for me. It's also like a lot of older children feel responsible and that like they should take care of the younger one. I did that. Yeah. When I was growing up, and Zach's like that with you. Oh, he is. No, he's not. He'll kill you, but no one else is allowed to. No, if anything, I'm like that towards him. You are that too. Take care of me, Mike. He does take care of you. No, he doesn't. He's a pest. Not a lot. He's a butthead for sure. But I feel like most brothers are. So yeah, he like will financially take care of me. That's about it. Maybe it's because you had to scare your mom and he was afraid. Maybe. I mean, because I know multiple times I would get up in our dad's face for getting on to Zach, and I'm like, don't even. That's my brother. It's like when our cousin would pick on him. Nobody was allowed to pick on Zach except for me. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I scared my cousin because I was mean. I'm still mean. Yeah. I was meaner then. Oh, yeah. Yep. I was like a honey badger. But yeah, I recommend this story. I really do. It didn't read, I think, as fictionalized as Woman of No Importance, but I think mostly just because there was a kind of a bit of info dumping, like on setting the scene for things, which I know is important, but also I really don't care about the political climate. Like I really don't. Like, I don't know. I mean, it kind of sets the scene for a couple of things that happen that also like, I guess, intertwine and like ended up being part of like a narrative for some like pastors or whatever, but
Also, I don't know. I just want to follow Robert.
Yeah.
Like, it was very interesting. And that kind of just broke it up and made me like, bleh.
I was trying to see if there was a documentary.
Ooh.
But I'm
Okay,
not
so his name
seeing.
is Robert Coombs. Coombes.
Well, there's some YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another podcast that covers it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. And I think I am going to like look into these documentaries and YouTube videos because that's pretty fun. I don't ever think to look for things like this on nonfiction books. And I don't know why, because obviously they're a thing.
I don't either.
Yeah. It was like you guys wanted the movie for A Woman of No Importance. And I tell you what, I watched that movie. I don't know if I ever talked about it. I hated it.
I think you did. At least you talked to me about it.
Yeah. Like it wasn't that accurate. Like I know it was a movie, but they also put together like some other, like a couple of other women's stories who like were real women, but none of them worked together. And it made them look like Virginia Hall was recruited by this woman. She wasn't. And then she worked with another woman who was radio tech, and she wasn't. Like she didn't know anybody specifically. And she got herself to where she was. Like she did that. And it wasn't really anybody recruiting her. Like it's made me mad, the whole thing. I was like, that's not how it happened.
Well, I can't find an actual documentary on Robert. So somebody needs to get on that.
Yeah.
That'd be a really good one, I think.
It would be. And I even like if we fictionalize the story, I don't think you would have to fictionalize it much. Because I mean, it really does still seem like a mystery. You don't actually know everything that happened, and you don't know what actually triggered it, or if anything really triggered it. I really feel like it did. But yeah, it's great. It's a great story in that sense. So I highly recommend it. So do we have any other final thoughts there?
It sounds like a really good book. I probably will try to listen to it at least,
Yeah, and I think we should definitely
get that one.
Get it. Yeah, it's very fun. Well, I mean, aside from like the grotesque murder part, but
the story's interesting.
The story is very interesting. It makes you think about a lot of different things. And yeah, I highly recommend it. Okay, so we will be discussing General Book Chat next, which I think will have some good stuff for you. And then we'll hop on to my deep dive picks, which is Resting Scrooge Face by Megan Quinn and Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. I want to go ahead and preface this. So Resting Scrooge Face is only an ebook or an audio book in Audible and or Kindle Unlimited. It is free to read in Kindle Unlimited. But yeah, so we can't actually buy that one. I'm kind of sad about it. But Letters from Father Christmas, you can find. And I think we're going to try and get it as well. It is, oh my God, such a cute book. So, but anyway, we'll then discuss our last curiosity of the year. And then we'll have our last book chat of 2023. Isn't that so weird to think about?
Yes. Yes, it is.
We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. It's time to sign off. But before we go, only the best libraries have librarians who don't shush you or murder you.